Have you ever stood in front of your closet full of clothes and thought, "Who am I even dressing for anymore?" Or looked at your phone bill and wondered how it got so high, even though you hardly use half the features? You're not alone. After 60, something subtle begins to shift. Life quiets down just enough for us to actually hear our own thoughts, to notice the light in the kitchen window in the morning, or the way a grandchild's laughter fills a room. It's a beautiful chapter, but also a time when the little choices we make, especially about how we spend our money, start to matter more than ever. You see, for years we made decisions while rushing, juggling careers, raising families, planning for the future. But now we're living that future. And yet, some habits from our younger days quietly tag along. They used to serve us. Now, they may be holding us back in ways we don't even notice. That's why today I want to have an honest, heart-to-heart conversation. Not to criticize or lecture, goodness knows we've had enough of that, but to gently shine a light on some common spending traps that many women fall into after 60. These aren't failures. They're just habits, patterns, things we can shift. And even just noticing them can help us breathe a little easier. Let's begin with something many of us know all too well: designer labels. For decades, brands like Chanel, Coach, or Nordstrom weren't just about fashion. They were about identity. Looking polished helped us feel confident in the office, at dinner parties, even around the holidays with family. My dear friend Diane, who's 67 and lives in a quiet corner of Pennsylvania, used to be that woman. Her closet was immaculate. Every morning, she matched earrings with scarves, shoes with handbags, making sure she looked just so. But once she retired, something shifted. Her calendar was filled with gardening, baking with her grandkids, volunteering at the library. And one morning, standing in front of her closet, she asked herself, "Who exactly am I putting on $300 shoes for now?" That moment changed her. She didn't stop caring about how she looked, but she started dressing for herself. Soft, breathable clothes, comfortable shoes, and her favorite accessory? A smile that came from finally feeling at ease in her own skin. Because the truth is, elegance isn't something you wear. It's something you are. It's how you make someone feel when they sit beside you. It's in your laugh, your kindness, your stories. So next time you feel the urge to grab that flashy handbag or expensive pair of heels, pause. Ask yourself, will this add joy or just cost? The freedom that comes from letting go of appearances, that's worth more than any brand name stitched into a collar. Now, let's talk about something a bit sneakier: the constant pressure to upgrade technology. New phones, new tablets, smartwatches. It seems like every few months, there's another commercial telling us we're falling behind if we don't keep up. My friend Carolyn, 71 and sharp as ever, found herself swept up in this when she bought the newest phone on the market. Titanium frame, ultra-wide camera, facial recognition. It had it all. Except, what it didn't have was simplicity. She couldn't find her contacts. The keyboard felt different. She missed important calls without even realizing it. All she really wanted was to FaceTime her daughter and see pictures of her new great-grandbaby. Her old phone? It could have done that just fine. Carolyn eventually returned the new phone and went back to her old one, and you could see the relief in her face. No more scrolling through confusing menus. No more frustration. Just connection, the way it was meant to be. Sometimes, the wisest thing we can do is let good enough be good enough. Newer isn't always better, and peace of mind is priceless. That brings me to something that often feels invisible, until it's not: credit card interest. We don't always talk about this one, do we? It feels personal, a little embarrassing even, but it happens to so many of us. Linda, who's 70 and recently widowed, knows this story well. After her husband passed, she started using her credit card more often. A little online shopping to feel less lonely, sending gifts to her grandchildren, small home repairs. It didn't feel extravagant, but it added up. One day she sat down and added up just the interest she had paid in 2 years, over $9,000. Her heart sank. That money could have gone toward a trip to visit her sister or been set aside for medical needs. But you know what I admire most about Linda? She didn't spiral into shame. She made a plan. She called her bank, arranged a payment plan, and began tackling it step by step. She sold a few things she didn't need. Most importantly, she forgave herself. Because carrying debt isn't just about numbers, it's about how it weighs on your spirit. It can keep you up at night, make you feel stuck, but it doesn't have to stay that way. There's help. There are ways forward. And the lighter your financial load, the lighter your heart. You are not the sum of your credit balance. You're a woman with wisdom, grit, and so much more life to enjoy. It's these little shifts, not in spending, really, but in awareness, that open the door to peace and possibility. You've worked hard. You've earned the right to feel free. Free from expectations, free from pressure, free from the quiet burdens we carry without realizing. Whether it's the name on a label, the newest gadget, or the growing numbers on a bill, you have the power to choose something different now. Something lighter. Something that honors who you are today, not who the world once told you to be. And as we keep going, I hope you'll stay with me, because there's more to uncover and more stories to share. Let's keep walking this path together. Sometimes the sneakiest spending habits aren't the big purchases, they're the tiny ones. The ones that quietly nibble away at our bank accounts without us even noticing. You might not think twice about a $9 charge here or a $15 bill there. But over time, those little amounts can grow into something big. That's exactly what happened to my friend Patricia. She's 65, lives in Texas, and during the pandemic, she found comfort in signing up for just about every streaming service under the sun. Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, a few fitness apps. At the time, it felt like a lifeline. She told me I liked having options. It felt like control during a time when everything else felt out of control. But as the months passed and life slowly returned to a new normal, Patricia realized something. She wasn't watching most of it. In fact, she spent her evenings rewatching 2 old mystery shows and a weekly cooking program, both of which were available for free on basic TV. One afternoon, she finally sat down and totaled up her monthly subscriptions. Over $90. That's more than $1,000 a year for services she barely touched. And when she saw that number, her jaw dropped. It wasn't just about the money, it was about what that money could have gone toward. A weekend trip with her sister. A few spontaneous lunches out. A cushion for rainy days. But the beauty of Patricia's story isn't just what she realized, it's what she did next. She went through her bank statements, made a list of every subscription, and canceled all but one. And here's the twist. She discovered that her local library offered a free streaming app called Canopy. Thousands of documentaries, movies, and classic shows. No monthly fee. Just her library card. That discovery made her smile. Because sometimes when we clear the clutter, we find treasures right in front of us. Now, I want to take a gentle turn into something a little more emotional. Let's talk about the dream of the lottery. That hopeful Wednesday night or Saturday morning moment where we hold a ticket in our hand and imagine what life could be like. The house paid off. The grandkids' college fund filled. A long cruise with friends. My friend Nancy, 65 from Ohio, used to play Powerball every single week. Not a lot, $10 here, 20 there if the jackpot was especially tempting. And it wasn't really about the money. It was about the dream. She told herself, maybe next time. Then, one evening, she sat down and did the math. 5 years of tickets. Over $5,000 gone. And not a dime to show for it. Just a drawer full of losing stubs and a soft sigh of regret. But instead of beating herself up, Nancy made a decision. From that day on, every time she would have bought a ticket, she transferred that same amount, $10, into a special savings jar. She called it her Future Joy Fund. And little by little, that jar began to grow. She used it to take a pottery class, to go on a local group trip to a botanical garden, to buy birthday presents for her grandkids without worry. She created her own version of winning without waiting on numbers to line up. Because here's the truth. We are already rich in the ways that truly matter. In love, in experience, in wisdom that can't be measured in dollars or matched by any jackpot. If you found yourself holding on to that dream ticket, I invite you to pause, not to stop dreaming, but to begin building the life you want in small, real ways. That's where the true magic happens. And that brings me to a habit that many women turn to in times of transition: ordering food delivery. After all, it's easy. A few taps on your phone and dinner shows up at your door. No cooking, no dishes, no planning. For my dear friend Sharon, 63 and recently widowed, this habit started with grief. Cooking for one felt empty. Meals became something she just didn't have the heart for. So she ordered in. 4, sometimes 5 nights a week. Thai food, burgers, pasta, whatever felt comforting in the moment. But a year later, she went for a routine checkup, and her doctor gave her a wake-up call. Her blood pressure had crept up. She felt tired, foggy. Her weight had increased, and so had her grocery bill, except it wasn't groceries. It was takeout. Over $3,000 in a year spent not on nourishing meals, but on food she barely remembered eating. That realization cut deep. And so Sharon made a quiet promise to herself. 3 home-cooked meals a week. Nothing fancy. Just real food made with her own hands. Roasted vegetables, homemade soup, grilled chicken, simple things that reminded her of the meals she used to cook for her family. And slowly, something shifted. She began to enjoy the act of cooking again. The smell of garlic and olive oil, the sound of her knife on the cutting board, the rhythm of caring for herself in a way that went beyond eating. She even started inviting her neighbor over for lunch once a week, and together they laughed over old recipes and swapped stories. Her health improved, her mood lifted, and the kitchen that once felt so quiet began to feel like home again. Of course, there's nothing wrong with the occasional delivery night. We all need a break sometimes. But when it becomes the default, we lose something deeper, the connection to what nourishes us from the inside out. Cooking, even just for yourself, is an act of self-love, a way of saying, I'm worth the effort. So if you found yourself relying a little too much on convenience, maybe this is your gentle reminder that you deserve more than a plastic bag and a takeout container. You deserve warmth, care, and meals that feed your body and your heart. We've all walked different paths to this moment, but many of us share these quiet habits. And that's what makes this conversation so important. Not because any of these choices make us wrong, but because recognizing them helps us choose better. It helps us live lighter, freer, more in tune with what we really need, and not just what the world offers us in passing. There's a kind of guilt that sneaks in when we walk past something we once had high hopes for. A treadmill collecting dust, a stationary bike doubling as a coat rack. We meant well. We were excited. We thought, this is the year I'll really do it. But then life got in the way, as it always does. For Deborah, a warm and witty 68-year-old from Georgia, it started with a top-of-the-line elliptical. It gleamed in her living room like a promise. For 2 weeks, she was on it every morning. And then, a sore knee. A visit from family. A change in rhythm. 1 week off turned into a month. And every time she walked past it, the elliptical seemed to stare back. Not just as a machine, but as a quiet reminder of what she hadn't done. But here's the thing. Deborah didn't give up on herself. One afternoon, after a long conversation with a friend, she made a brave choice. She let the guilt go. She sold the elliptical to a neighbor who genuinely wanted it. And instead, she joined a local walking group that met at the park twice a week. No pressure. No fancy gear. Just her sneakers, fresh air, and the company of women who walked at their own pace. She started sleeping better. Her joints felt looser. And her smile, her real, joyful smile, came back. Because she wasn't failing. She was finally finding a rhythm that fit her life. If you've ever stared at that piece of equipment with a mix of shame and frustration, I want you to know this. You are not lazy. You are human. You don't need to buy your way into health. What your body really needs is love, consistency, and movement that brings you joy, not guilt that takes up space in your living room. Now let's talk about something that many of us turn to when we're searching for direction: personal growth courses. Maybe it's a webinar, a life coaching program, a 5-week path to finding your purpose. They show up in our emails, our social media feeds, promising to unlock a missing piece of ourselves. And sometimes they truly do help. But other times, they leave us wondering where all that money went. Susan, a 72-year-old retired nurse from Minnesota, knows that feeling too well. After she stepped away from her long and meaningful career, she felt unmoored, like her compass had disappeared. So when an online course promised to help her rediscover her fire, she signed up. Over $4,000. Weekly Zoom calls. Journals full of guided questions. A private Facebook group. For months she poured her heart into it. But when it ended, Susan sat alone with her notes and realized something. The things she'd written, the truths, the wisdom, the insights, were already inside her. She hadn't bought a new identity. She'd remembered an old one. And that realization changed everything. She stopped looking outside for answers and turned inward. She joined a local book club. She volunteered once a week at a women's shelter. She began mentoring a younger woman who had recently lost her mother. And in giving, she found purpose. Not because she paid someone to show her the way, but because she lived her way back to it. Personal growth doesn't always come with a price tag. Sometimes it comes through community, conversation, contribution. You don't need fixing. You're not broken. You're evolving. And your most powerful lessons are already within you. That brings us to one final spending trap, and it's a big one. The shiny allure of a brand new car. There's something tempting about stepping into a dealership and saying, "I deserve this." And you do. You deserve comfort, safety, reliability. But what you might not deserve is a monthly payment that quietly eats away at your freedom. Evelyn, a vibrant 76-year-old from Illinois, had always driven used cars. But when her last one finally gave out, she thought, "I'm retired. I've worked hard. I want something new." So she bought a fully loaded SUV. The new car smell, the smooth ride, it felt wonderful. For a while. But as the months rolled on, Evelyn started noticing how tight things were getting. She skipped a weekend trip with friends, put off a little kitchen repair, said no to a dinner out, not because she didn't want to go, but because that car payment was looming. A year later, Evelyn did something bold. She traded the SUV for a certified pre-owned sedan, just 2 years old, barely used, still under warranty. Her payments were cut in half. And with the savings, she booked a train trip through the Rockies. She called me after that trip and said, "That view was worth more than anything I gave up on 4 wheels." Because here's what she learned. We're not here to impress anyone anymore. We're here to live. And sometimes, the best investment isn't in what you drive. It's in where that ride can take you, and who you get to be along the way. So here we are. 9 spending habits. Some loud, some quiet, all of them real. You might see yourself in one, or a few. And if you do, I hope you feel something powerful. Not guilt, not shame, but permission. Permission to pause. Permission to choose again. Permission to say, "That served me once, but I'm ready for something different now." Because this chapter of your life, it's yours. No one else gets to write it. You've lived through heartache and healing, beginnings and endings. You've raised families, built homes, carried the weight of so much. And now is the time to lay some of that weight down. Not because you're done growing, but because you've earned the right to grow gently. If something in these stories spoke to you, I'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let someone else know they're not alone. Because you never know who needs to hear your story to take their next brave step. And if this video brought you comfort, clarity, or just a little spark of hope, please pass it along to a friend, a sister, a neighbor. This life we're building now, it's too precious to walk through alone. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself. Spend wisely. Live freely. And always remember, the most beautiful investment you can make is in the life that still lies ahead.